I was a visual artist for several decades. I was a visual artist while I was filming the footage that you see here. And so I didn't actually set out to make a film while I was filming this. I was really filming it for my own memory and to hold on to my family. I had been making artwork that included video with sculpture, so I was familiar with how to use a camera. But you saw in an early scene in the film this little Sony PC-1, which was my constant sidekick in those early days. And this was pre-iPhone culture, so it was a very different era technologically, and I just had this camera with me all the time, long before difficult things happened in my family. And so I was happily filming my relationship, my marriage, my conception of my child, you name it. And then all of a sudden these things started to unfold in my family, and I just kept the camera rolling. And they were incredibly gracious to me to let me do that and let me film them. And I felt like it was almost like my own memory bank repository when I was filming them. And I also had recently moved to New Hampshire, and I think as a sort of visual meditation and / coping mechanism while these things were happening in my family, I was also kind of obsessively filming what was going on in my yard, with life and death issues unfolding right in front of me. And what I did consider my art at the time was those beautiful black background footage pieces with my family's bodies in my hands. And that was very much in the style of how I'd been working as a visual artist at the time, which was very composed in the studio, very controlled. And again, my family was very gracious to allow me to make those films. But at the end of the day, when everything had transpired in my family, I felt like, well, that footage with my hands and their bodies was how to put it, insignificant, really, in comparison with what had happened, what had transpired. And I couldn't imagine making a visual art piece in a gallery as I had up until that point with that footage. It just seemed like not the right feeling, and it wasn't what I considered appropriate to show in a commercial art gallery. So all of the tapes I had made, which were really for myself, of the family, along with what I thought was my art, I just put in a box. And I shelved it for about 5 years. And then as my children grew old, I had another child. I made other artworks. And then at some point, I was invited on an art residency program to Yaddo. And I was a little angsting, like, well, what am I know there's so many things I want to do there, because the time is going to be so precious. And my husband, John, was like, that box has been bugging you, because you keep referring to that box in the corner. And I was like, yeah, I got to deal with that box. So it was the only thing I took with me to kind of force myself to deal with it. And then for the next 10 days, like 24 hours a day, because this is old-fashioned like DV tape, I was just ingesting it into the computer and sleeping, waking up, watching it, labeling the tapes, sleeping, watching it, around the clock. And a little bit of yoga and a little eating, but, it was like, and by the end of those 10 days, I realized this needs to be a film. And now I have to learn how to make a film, because I'd never made a film. So that was the beginning of my journey that then took 5 years to get to what you see now. To cull through the footage, to learn how to edit, and to make a story from what I knew was there in that raw footage, because so few people in our culture talk about death, and I knew I had some very rare material to share. And so that's how this transpired.